My friends, there's a very common expression among parents: the days are long, but the years are short. It's meant, I think, to be said and to comfort new parents who are sort of struggling through the first few months and the first few years of having young children. For example, earlier this week, my daughter cried in the middle of the night because she didn't have her pacifier, because she had stood up or at least thrown it out of her crib on purpose and demanded that at 3:14 in the morning, I retrieve it for her. I don't know how helpful this expression is to parents. Let's be honest, there's nothing that can really help parents going through the newborn phase, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true. And so as I was preparing to talk tonight about Parashat Vaera, I thought a lot about the idea of time. Now, this is a great Torah portion, by the way. It is the first 7 plagues. I guess it's not great for the Egyptians. It's great for other people. It's not great for the Egyptians. There's a lot of really deep and meaty stuff. We had a good conversation earlier today. But I wanted to talk about time, and especially how in the Torah we see that events and time and the distance, the temporal distance, seems to contract and dilate depending on what the narrative is. As an example, in Genesis, we read that in just 2 sentences, that after Noah gets off the ark, he plants a vineyard and gets drunk. And for anyone who has ever planted anything successfully, which is not me, you know that if there's a long period of time between planting the vineyard and being able to get drunk. But honestly, that growing phase, not all that important. We don't need to see any of it. Maybe if this were a movie, we'd have a montage of growing scenes and scenes of Noah and his sons picking the grapes, maybe set to some upbeat 80s song. But in the Torah, nothing. The same thing happened last week. We went from reading about the people who came with Joseph into Egypt, right at the very end of the book of Bereshit, to learning that a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. We know that centuries have passed in between these 2 books of the Torah, but it's not made explicitly clear. I think that there are some lessons that we can draw from this. I will say that I do sometimes get in trouble with my family for referencing the Grateful Dead too often in my sermons. I don't think you can reference the Grateful Dead too often, but we'll ask my family about that. But a while ago, I spoke about a song, a late period Grateful Dead song called "The Days Between," in which the singer emphasizes that there are important days, and then there's the days between, which sort of all blends together. This is, I think, important for all of us, because let's be real, most of our lives are spent in these days between. Most days, nothing particularly notable happens, especially if you're telling the story of your life. We wake up, we eat, we go to class, we probably ignore some things we have to do, and we go to sleep. Nothing's wrong with this. Most days are like this. Every night before I go to sleep, I as part of my process, I think of something good that happened with each of my family members, my wife and my son and my daughter. And at that time, they're important in that day, but really, I can't remember what I was thinking about yesterday or Wednesday or earlier this week. There are days between. And in some ways, this is what the Torah is doing. The descent from being sort of honored guests of the Egyptians to being slaves happened over centuries, not days. And so it would be impossible and not helpful to recount every single episode to every single Israelite that happened in that intervening time. We don't need to read every awful thing that happened to know exactly what happened. I don't think this is really the element of our lives in which we kind of block out some things that happen. I vividly remember loving high school. I'm not sure that anybody else here loved high school, but I loved it. I had great friends. I had fun. But that probably means that I'm not remembering essays and tests. And I had physical books and a locker and all of these things that were probably at the time not all that much fun. Time is really a funny thing. We deeply and fully feel successes and stresses every day, every week. Our interactions with each other leave impressions on us. And how often have you felt compelled to tell one of your friends that, man, this weird thing happened to me, this cashier at Target was kind of odd. But then if someone asked you the next week what it was, you probably couldn't remember. It was important at that time. if you were really going to tell the story of your life, any of your lives? Would that interaction with the target cashier make it? Probably not. And the same is true for the Torah. Obviously, for the Israelites, those events, the suffering of slavery was important. The years between Bereshit and Shemot were profound. But for us to understand our heritage, which is what the Torah is for, it's okay to fast forward. We can skip the days between Joseph's arrival and Moses' departure. We're all made up of what happens in these intervening days. We pile these hours and these days and these weeks on top of each other, one insignificant event after another, until we look back and we can see in our rearview mirror the entire story of our lives. And I suppose before I wrap up and we move into the Amida, that I think we're all thinking deeply about this idea of time. I know that I certainly was. It's easy to be numb to the days and weeks and years now that hostages have been in Gaza. But last week on Sunday, and I spoke about this a little bit last Friday, but I didn't want to jinx it. I didn't want to talk about what was going to happen too deeply. We saw 3 women. We saw Romy, Emily, and Daron reunited with their family at Sheba Medical Center. And you have to think that that's a moment that will be written down. That moment of the curtain opening and the reunion. And I think that as we have another weekend and another presumably release of 4 women on Sunday, maybe we have more events like that we as a people can celebrate together. Shabbat Shalom.